Hey, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have count them, two doctors on the podcast today. Yep, this is interesting. Dr. Wayne Benenson is on and Dr. Barb Hughson is on. We're going to be talking about a book that they co-wrote together. And these two came on and we had such an amazing conversation. And this was my first time having two guests on the podcast. So this was interesting to go back and forth with two guests. So I learned a lot just by listening, and the topic is amazing. We're going to talk about empathy, grit, and growth mindset. They have a new book coming out, and we're going to talk all about that. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. This is definitely one you're going to want to listen to and make notes on. And you might want to listen to this one twice because there's a lot of great information here. And their book's coming out April 18th, and we're going to get into that here on the Living the Next Chapter podcast. Dr. Wayne, Dr. Barb, the two doctors are here, and they will both see you now. Let's jump into the podcast. Thanks for being here. Here we go. Okay, everyone, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Okay, now I've had a doctor on before, and one of my favorite things to say is the doctor will see you now. But now, not only do I have one doctor, we've multiplied now, and we have two doctors now on for the price of one. So please find a very comfortable spot to sit, grab a pen, grab some paper, because we're going to have a great time together with two of my favorite new doctors. They're here together. Dr. Barb and Dr. Wayne are here with us today to talk about their new book that's coming out April 18th. And we're going to have a fun conversation together. Welcome to you both to Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you.
So great to have you both here. Now, when we talked earlier, we laughed. We had some great conversation. I left inspired speaking to you both, and I've been looking forward to this day with great expectations and anticipation because I think we're going to have a great conversation. So again, welcome, welcome, welcome. Nice to have you both here. Dr. Barb, let's start with you. Can you tell everybody where you are in this great world and a little bit about you to start off our time together?
Sure. Yeah, you bet. So I am in a small town in Colorado, and I've been out in the West. I grew up in New York State, so I've been out in the West for about 23 years now. And I started my career actually as a therapist. So I worked with kids and families for a long time, and then I shifted into doing a lot of work for the court system. So I do family law mediation. And I've also been teaching online for a long time, which I really love. I teach students of various levels, undergrad, MBA students, etc. And then along the way, I decided to get my doctorate, and that's how I met Dr. Wayne. He was actually my advisor and my mentor and my committee chair, and he shepherded me through that whole process. And we created a program out of the research that I did, and we now have a book that'll be coming out soon. So we've been, colleagues, friends, just very close for a long time, and talk regularly. It's not a week will go by where we don't speak to one another about something. So we have a great relationship, and we love helping people, and we love working with people and watching them transform from the caterpillar into the butterfly. So.
Very nice. Okay, Dr. Wayne, you've been set up real well here. So let's talk about you and a little bit about your background as well.
How can I top that?
I know, right?
I mean, I'm done. Okay, well, keep going. We're done.
Yeah.
I love it.
I have been a teacher for 50 years, all the grade levels, preschool to grad school. And people always ask me, what grade do you like to teach the most? I said, whatever I'm teaching. So this is a teaching moment. So finding that teachable moment is just very, very cool. And it's exciting because that's when people agree to grow. And there's a lot of, unhappiness and anxiety in our world. And I think a lot of that can be traced to people not being willing to grow, because growing can be scary, but it's also a hell of a lot of fun. So I have taught both in the public schools and in the private schools, and rural and urban and suburban and online. And right now I am tutoring kids in a traditional program, and I'm also teaching mindfulness online. And I started doing that. I was a mindfulness instructor at a local school in Phoenix, where I live. And when the pandemic went down, a lot of the parents of my kids said, my kids are suffering. They don't have that peer thing that you get in schools. Can you help them? And since I was already known in that community, I got a lot of kids, and I've kept many of those kids since. So we basically do what we're doing right now, to be honest with you, David. We just have a lot of fun and talk about living our best lives.
Beautiful.
And that's me.
I love it. Okay, so where did the idea of writing this book come from? You guys talk all the time and you get to share life together, and sounds like you two get along pretty good. So where did the idea of writing this book and
Dr. Barb tricked me. That's the real, yeah, she tricked me. Yeah. So I was her thesis chair for her dissertation, which is really a fascinating dissertation. And often a student, after spending a lot of time, takes 2 or 3 years to do a dissertation. Though it's hard to let go because it's like a baby. And oftentimes a student will say, I'd like to take some of this dissertation and write an article for a scholarly journal. And can you help me? Which is great for me because I don't have to do anything. They do the writing and I just use my contacts. So that was happening. And one thing led to another. And it never made it to a journal, and it ended up becoming a book-length book. There was so much material that we hadn't really addressed. And because of her background in counseling and organizational management, she's a leadership coach, especially with women in entrepreneurial organizations, we just realized that we had something there that needed to be addressed. And one thing led to another, and we got the book.
Dr. Barb, what would you like to add to that? That sounds like an amazing start.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. And, I think we both have such a passion and belief in our concepts that we talk about, our key 3 that we'll get into, that we truly believe that these concepts help people move the dial and really help them make changes. And with Wayne's background in mindfulness too, it's really fun. We work with clients together and we weave in mindfulness, we weave in our key 3, and we just really help them turn into better versions of themselves and move through the stuck moments in time and find new ways of thinking and looking at things. So it's fun. We, love creating content, and again, we love the clients that we're working with and just have a really good time watching this transformation happen.
Okay, Dr. Barb, who's the ideal audience for this book?
You.
Yeah.
You and your listeners.
Yes.
Good.
That's been one of the difficulties of what we do, because we decided early on not to have a niche audience. Like, this is good for business people or business leaders, or this is good for elementary school teachers. We want it to be good for any human being who wanted to be unstuck or wanted to find their dreams. And our experience was, or my experience at least, was a lot of the students I had were like just fabulous students. They were used to getting A's. They were used to someone laying out a syllabus and then they following everything to the T and they get their grade. And yet, when you're at the doctorate level, that works only until you take your comps. And then you have to write the book, your dissertation. And all these fabulous students just kind of melted in a hot mess. And they weren't sure what to do. And I found that by some nudging and some challenging, they knew exactly what to do. And the book is the cheater's notes on that nudging and challenging.
Nice.
So the nice thing I can say is I had a 96% success rate for students doing their dissertation. And nationally, the best you can hope for is 50%. So I think something was working well.
Yeah. Dr. Wayne was working well.
Okay, so we haven't talked yet, but the name of the book. What's the name of the book?
Wayne?
Go for it, Barb.
Claim Your Light.
Okay.
Go for it, Wayne. Unlock Capacity. Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
Oh, claim your light, unlock your capacity to live a more vibrant and authentic life. And it's our belief that people just kind of live in the shadows. They only live a half-baked life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they want to live in a bigger life, but I think their fears get in their way, or maybe some story they tell themselves about what happened in their childhood, or about not wanting to face the future for some understandable reasons. And our belief is that through using the key 3 and just paying attention to inner quiet, I'm so busy in our modern world, you'll get whatever answers you need to solve the problems that are on your plate and move forward. So becoming a more authentic and vibrant person, I think, is something that's important in this moment in our time.
Beautiful. Okay, Dr. Barb, can you tell us the key 3? And then I would like to kind of go into these and kind of talk a little bit about these.
Yes, you bet. So the key 3 include grit, growth mindset, and empathy. And my research looked at those 3 concepts in the mediation world, working with families. And I found that the mediators that were able to really help guide people using these concepts, like using the concept of empathy, looking at like sticking with the process, persevering, and keep working forward so that you can make some good agreements, and really thinking about other possibilities, helped people create more durable agreements. And that's what our goal was. In the court system, we're always looking at, let's just get an agreement. And it's almost like get an agreement and move on, but that's not life. So what we're really trying to do is help people with using these concepts really be able to make changes that stick, that last for a long time, longer than a couple months when then everything falls apart. So grit, growth mindset, and empathy.
Okay, so when I hear the word grit, my wife and I have a little side business where we work with wood and we reclaim stuff and keep it out of the landfill. So I get like furniture pieces and stuff and I do work on it, right? And for me, grit is sandpaper. Sandpaper comes in different types of grit, from really rough to get the hard, rough stuff off, really down to really fine stuff. You could sand glass with it, right? And so there's different grit for different applications. So you have to know which grit to use in the right order to make your project turn out properly. So when I hear the word grit, my mind goes to sandpaper. Now, that might not be exactly what the two of you were thinking when you wrote this, but I find that in the example of sandpaper, that you have to follow the steps. If you use the sandpaper in the wrong order, you'll get terrible results. But you can go from something that's harsh to something that's gentle, and it all has the same impact, right? So can you take me down the road now from your point of view of grit, and let's add a little color to the term grit and kind of your approach to this?
Let me take a stab at that. Before I get into grit, though, I want to give some context to what Dr. Barb said. In her dissertation, she looked at 2 groups of people who were doing family law mediation. And they tended to be lawyers, for one group, who were doing mediation on the side, because judges just don't really deal with divorce stuff, especially with kids, because the law is not really specific. It's a human nature problem. So they let mediators work it out with the parents. The other group were counselors. And what she did is wanted to see who had a better settlement rate, the lawyer mediators or the counselor mediators. And by far and away, it was the counselor mediators. And the reason they had a better rate was the subject of her dissertation. what were the qualities that were going on with these counselor mediators that weren't happening with the lawyer mediators. And at first she thought it was a gender-based thing, the women mediators were going to be better, and that really wasn't significant. But people who had empathy, grit, and growth mindset tended to have a higher settlement rate. So when you look at that, your example of grit is spot on. You could be applying a real coarse sandpaper to a human problem, an interpersonal relation problem, and you're going to get people really pissed off. Or you could be doing something with fine sandpaper and nothing really happens.
Right.
It's not the right application at the right time. So grit means to have perseverance over a long time. I mean, that's the textbook definition, but it's not our definition. Our definition is what's needed right now and what can be offered. And when we do Zoom trainings, both with kids and with adults. Just parenthetically, kids are a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
They want to grow. They don't want to stay in their mess. Where adults, I don't think they want it. They just don't know any better.
Yeah.
I think they have more fears. So we'll ask the question, tell me what you've done. And they'll say, blah, blah, blah. And I said, does that work? And they say, no. I said, well, let's explore things that do work. That's finding the right grade of sandpaper to get you through.
Yeah. Nice.
Wow. I feel like I'm part of the team now. This is great.
There you go.
You are. The sandpaper, that's a great pic. That's a great image. The sandpaper, actually. I like that.
Right. Does that work then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we go a little bit more? Like, what's the practical point that you're trying to pull through the book about grit? How is it something that's put into place? How is it practiced as the reader goes through the book? Can you give us a little insight to that?
I'll try, and Barb, just interrupt me whenever. Change can frighten people, especially if it's change that brings up traumatic memories. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I don't want to look at that. Whatever that thing is, if it's finding Mr. Right or Ms. Right, or balancing your checkbook, or weight loss, or whatever the problem is, people tend to have a lot of unhappy memories around it. So we say, all right, let's just do some change. No. And they'll resist. You don't get change usually when you resist. You get it when you can accept the situation for what is. Problem is, most people can't do that alone. If they could, they would have. And we wouldn't have had our careers. You need a companion to come with you and say, okay, you're going to see something around the next turn. I want you to be aware of it so you don't get freaked out. Having that friend along with you is a big deal because it allows you to say, okay, something's big coming. I don't have to stay hyper alert all the time just for this moment. And then after a certain length of time, you start to relax and you start to do the things that are already in your system. It's just that you needed a little bit of affirmation. So all three of those things together, the empathy, the grit, and the growth mindset, help you to see yourself as a newer person, the expanded consciousness. And one of the things we like to say a lot is our job is to help you relax your consciousness so you don't come into your problem solving with an uptight feeling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr.
And
Barb,
I
you
think,
got more.
Yeah. And, I think about too, a lot of the work I do, even as a leadership coach, is kind of deep dive stuff. I was just meeting with a leadership client this morning who has an employee she's just floating around at the surface. And I said, we got to get her down a little bit deeper. And so I was guiding him to help. And the thing that's always amazing too is, I love seeing aha moments, and the grit pieces, like hanging in there, staying in there. So when you start talking about the hard stuff or the traumas or things like that, we want to run, shut it down, stop, not deal with that. But what we realize is once we get in there and we start to like unfold the layers, we feel a little lighter. And then maybe next time we feel lighter yet again. And then maybe we feel even, oh my gosh, I feel happy all of a sudden. I wasn't feeling that. And so allowing people to just have that experience of, what if we were to like just peel back one layer, what does that feel like, while we're in it and then afterwards. And so we're always checking in with people on, how are you on a scale 1 to 10 right now? And, just doing little check-ins with people. So helping people just like hang in there, because it's amazing what you can feel like after you've kind of dug in there and done the harder stuff.
Okay. I like grit. I love it. And I think it's something that's lacking in today's society, really.
Yeah.
There's that stick-to-itiveness to it. There's a bunch that I can my mind goes to every time I hear the word grit. So I'm glad to see that's part of the 3. So Dr. Wayne, what is empathy not? I want the opposite of empathy before we talk about what's in the book. What's kind of a misunderstanding about empathy that people tend to think of that really is not empathy?
You know anyone, David, who's self-absorbed? They're just not thinking about anything about satisfying their own pleasure.
Right.
That's the opposite. And it goes 2 ways. One way is obviously interpersonal. I don't care about anyone else. I just care about me.
Yeah.
So the image there would be of a 3-year-old kid. The 3-year-old kid's supposed to be doing that. Developmentally, that's where 3-year-olds are at. Some of us don't get past that 3-year-old motive as adults. That we're living in a big world. There's 8 billion of us now. We've got to start thinking about each other. We're going to survive. So that's the interpersonal. But the intrapersonal, INTRA, is also important about empathy. Who is it that I could be? We talk about our best life, but who is it about my best self that I'm not even aware of sometimes because I'm still stuck on that 3-year-old emotional self? So a lot of times our job is just to, as Dr. Barb said, peel back the layers so you can see you really are a butterfly. You just haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And can you give me a story when this particular persona came out? People can when there's trust. And that's a huge word with the empathy, is what's the trust. And Dr. Barb and I both work with people who are going through some really nasty divorces. And she gets the unfavorable part of that, dealing with the parents as they try to come up with a family plan, a child plan. And I usually work with the kids who are just wiped out. What has gone on here? My life was okay, and all of a sudden it's just there's no stability. And in both cases, it is about who we can be that's not looked at, rather than who we are. And who we are is, I'm going to blame you. If it wasn't for you, these things would be good. And that's not it at all. There's a situation here. How can we deal with it in a loving, kind way? And when you do that, the empathy it just comes out naturally because we really, as human beings, care about one another. But oftentimes when you get into a struggle, conflict and all that, the narcissism comes out. It's my way or the highway. We want to say, no, you're more human than that. And let's come up with some of these fun ways to be human. And once you do, the problems just take care of themselves, quite literally.
Dr. Barb, do you think that social media makes empathy more difficult in life when we're so focused on selfies and my Instagram highlight reel and my TikTok dance and all about me? Do you think that strips away a little bit of empathy?
I don't know if you want to get me started down this road.
Just wait, I got to take a selfie with my camera here.
Let me get a picture
there we
of
go.
myself on this podcast. Yeah, it's so interesting because I watch, I observe. I'm not someone who posts a lot on social media, and I observe what other people do. Dr. Wayne and he knows I have an issue with this, with people that all they post is, look at me, I've done this, I've won that, I'm this, and this. It's all about me, and all I think of is, how are you serving others? And that's how I try to move through life, is what can I do for you? How am I serving others? And I think another piece of empathy that kind of pops in my brain too is curiosity. And empathy is really also about, I'm wondering, why is the other person, so this other person's angry. I'm wondering why, what's underneath that, and having that, helping people. And the neat thing about empathy is it can be taught. So you can learn how to have more empathy. And so I think the social media world, it really does, it promotes, it's certainly, tools that were created for a certain reason. And now, of course, they go in all directions, right? They use social media for so many different things, but, really staying focused on here's how I can help you, or what can I do for you, I think is so important, and allows those feelings of empathy to come out versus, here's another selfie of me, and here's another, I was here at this thing speaking, and here's another thing I did. And it's okay to, self-promotion is fine, but I think sometimes people do get a lot caught up into that versus, here's how I can help and guide you, which again is kind of the angle that we come from.
Yeah. And one thing I heard somebody talking about was, when there's success in your life, we tend to build fences around our success to keep people out.
Yes.
But I think a more empathetic way of doing this is to build a bigger table and invite more people in.
Yes.
Right. So take that wealth and give it and share it, then protect it.
Right.
And in sharing it and giving out more of it and bringing more people to the table, then you're going to have even more wealth, because now it's multiplied.
And I think part of that wealth comes when we change our mindset from me first to we first.
Yeah.
And that we first is about collaboration.
Right.
And I'm a great fan of movies. So I love watching the Academy Awards. And they just had them a couple of nights ago. And the best picture and the best actor and actress and director went to a collaborative that had two directors, the Daniels. And they talked about that we were family and we cared about each other. And that's the new motif in creating art. It's not that on the top of the pile. It's that we created this thing of beauty together.
Yeah.
And that is part of our motif, which is quite the opposite of me first. It's really we first. And that gives a whole lot more joy, because it's nothing that I control. It's the relationship that's important.
Right.
Dr. Barb, has there been somebody in your life that's shown you empathy that really stands out, and you're like, that's my definition of empathy right there, that person, that moment?
Dr. Wayne.
There you go.
Dr. Wayne, he's really good at, if I find I'm getting stirred up over something, he just brings in the calm. He's
Nice.
really good at that. And he's able to, really flip something upside down in a different way than I hadn't thought about. So, I think it's nice when we can find somebody that gets us, that really understands who we are, what makes us tick, why, when our emotions fire up, what's underneath all that. And, so yeah, I would say Dr. Wayne does that for me for sure.
What a loving moment this is. My heart. Okay. The next big one of the three is growth mindset. Dr. Wayne, can you kind of give us the inside scoop? What do we need to know? And I think growth mindset is something that is lacking in so many areas. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts as it relates to the book, and kind of your process as you take us through this. I'm interested.
So I'll give you a little story. One of my favorite grades to teach is fourth grade. Kids are just lively, that they can do things. They know how to read. They can do their numbers. They actually have their own original thoughts, but they're not into teenagehood where the hormones pop. And it's just a lovely grade. Educators talk about it being the golden age. And in that moment, when I'm with these fourth graders, I have the dubious distinction of having to teach multiplication of fractions. multiplication of mixed fractions. And for some reason, that just doesn't compute with a 10-year-old girl's brain. And I get a whole lot of pushback. And the word can't comes up. I can't do this. I don't have the ability to do this. And it doesn't help when all the boys are saying, that's because you're stupid. And then we get a whole thing going. So growth mindset says, of course you can. You just haven't found the right route. So to look at growth mindset, to look at what growth means, I think you got to look at the opposite. The opposite is fixed mindset. And that's nothing more than an excuse you make in your head for can't. I can't do it. Here are all the reasons why. And as soon as you say that, I'm saying, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm not going to argue with you. But it's not going to help you learn mixed fractions multiplication. So what growth mindset is what do you need to get beyond what is stopping you right now? And oftentimes all it is most useful feedback. So these students, these 10-year-old girls, they needed something very particular. And my teaching style didn't give it to them, so I changed my teaching style. Instead of just talking about how you do the mechanics of multiplying mixed fractions, I made little pictures on the wall with little circles and X's and all that. And that's how they learned. They were visual. Or for someone else, it might have been auditory. For someone else, it might have been kinesthetic. You find out through feedback what it is you need to get there. And then the crowning moment was I got a new kid, another girl. And it was during that time when we were doing multiplication of fractions. And she said, oh, here's how you do it. My particular way of learning is through visual. I don't know what yours is, but if it's visual, here's how you do it. Growth mindset.
And the student becomes the teacher.
That's right.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Well, and Dr. Wayne knows my favorite thing, the growth mindset. A lot of the research was done by researcher Dr. Carol Dweck. And she has a great phrase that I love that says, you know, if you say you don't know how to do something, you just say, I don't know how to do this yet.
Yet.
And that word yet is kind of the magic. So it's like, I don't know how to do it now, but I can learn and I'm going to learn and I'm going to figure this out. So I don't know it yet, but I will. And so I think that's just, that little word is just so magical because it really just shifts people's thinking a lot. Like, oh yeah, you're right, but I can learn this. I don't know it now, but I can learn it.
What did the two of you learn by putting this book together in the talk, the back and forth, the conversation, the writing process? What did you learn individually about yourselves as you pulled this together?
That we can.
Good.
And I'll speak to myself. For me, I'm trained to seek out information to solve problems. So I have a long career of going and reading books to help me understand particular phenomena, like claiming what is rightfully yours. And I kept looking for the book that would help me, the book that I needed, that would allow me to grow into my best version of myself, and for me particularly to deal with my obstacle, which was fear. And I couldn't find it. A lot of the stuff with self-help comes out of the psychology literature or comes out of church stuff, theology, or comes out of business leadership, how you make better leaders. And I didn't want any of those. They didn't relate to me. I wanted something from education, and there was nothing there. So we wrote the book that we needed to read, and I kind of overcame my fears.
Nice. Dr. Barb.
I think, I think for me, Dr. Wayne and I just clicked when we first met. And, it's interesting when I started my program, one of the things he said in class one day was find a buddy. There's the companioning piece that we have in our program. Find somebody that you're going to stick to to get through this program. And I did. I found my good friend, Dr. Lisa, and we stuck together like glue. We tracked together and we literally sat down and said, when do we want to be finished? And we reversed engineered everything. And
Nice.
we helped each other get through a very difficult process. And so I think about that, Dr. Wayne has been that person for me, keeping me on track. Let's do this. And I think the piece of, being able to like visualize and hold the book in your hand is such a nice thing to be able to say like, wow, we can do this. I have the dissertation in my hand and I knew what it took to get that. And this is just a different variation of a theme. It's still writing, but it's a way to just actually visualize and then take that a step further and say, this can really help people. And we want to companion with them and guide them moving forward. So I think just having another goal and almost reverse engineering it and working together to get to that end point where we can say, here's our book and we can help guide you has been just an incredible journey.
Amazing. I love it. Okay, so for the authors that are listening to our podcast, let's take the three: empathy, grit, and growth mindset. How do we combine these three for a new author to create the book, build community, and get their message out into the world? Because I really believe that everyone has a story to tell. How do we combine these three and encourage the author that's listening to write the book?
That's a great question. In fact, that's the best question anyone could ask of any book. How do you get the story that's inside you out into the hands of other people, into the minds of other people? And our way of dealing with that was through a section we have in each chapter called our, now I've forgotten what it's called, our inner, what's it called, Barb? Our inner thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Just some discussion questions and some prompts.
So thinking about how we are thinking about all these things, how about our story, we have an inner moment. And as I said at the top of the hour, our society now is really fast. And I think that gets in the way of any real growth or storytelling. So you can't really appreciate a story unless you are comfortable with the storyteller telling the story in the style he or she is comfortable using. All right, get to the punchline, quick. So having this inner awareness really, really helps slow things down so you can appreciate what comes up. Oh, yeah, I've had a story just like that. And that's what gives us our humanness. So that inner dialogue, that inner moment of making yourself more calm allows you to take all these key three and put them together in a very useful way.
Dr. Barb, what do you have to add to that? That was great.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I always think of self-care, like a lot of these pieces kind of combine in together, hanging in there with things again, like taking care of yourself along the way, but knowing that, if you really want to change, you gotta hang in there. And empathy is also towards oneself, like being gentle with yourself and, understanding like, well, why am I stressed out today? Well, I'm having a hard time getting words on a page. Okay, that's okay. Well, maybe later today or tomorrow might be better. Like, giving yourself a little grace and space, to kind of work through your process is really important. And, the growth mindset again is just really about possibilities. And I love, when Wayne talks about, we always have a story and getting it out and sharing it with the world, I think is really important. It's like, what are we sharing with the world and how can we help and guide others and support others? I think is really pretty key. So
I love how both of you have talked externally, how we can put this into place, and then internally. What a great combo. You two really work well together. I really enjoy this.
You know what? I got to share one more thing.
Yeah.
It was kind of like part of answering your question, what have I learned? I wasn't sure that what we put out would have been of value to, for example, everyday readers. I knew that students that were coming for their doctorate who had particular fears of getting through their dissertation. This stuff worked wonderful for them. But they came to me with a certain motivation. I want you to help me learn research or whatever. One of the nice surprises of going through the publication process with our publisher was one day she was telling us of what was happening behind the veil in the back rooms. In modern publishing, one person doesn't read the book. About a half a dozen people do, and they each have their own skill. I'm skillful with grammar, and I'm skillful with formatting and whatnot. So about a half a dozen people on her team, read the book, and they said to her, "This is really helpful. This really makes sense. This is something that I can use right now." And that's what we wanted to hear. We didn't know that it would be that way for an everyday kind of person.
Okay, so before we go, and I'd rather just stay here talking to you both all day, but I know that's not practical, but where is the book going to be located? How are people going to find it? And people want to speak to you, reach out to the two of you. Where do we go? How does that happen?
Yeah, you bet.
You go for it, Dr. Barb.
Okay. Yep. So we have, our publisher is Wordee, WORDEE.com. So the book will be there and pre-order there. And it'll be on all the main platforms like Amazon. But our website is a great place to start, which is, greatmastersinc.com. And we'll have the book up there soon and people can buy the book there. And our email is info@greatmastersinc.com. So you can always send us an email. And we'll do, again, we're so global these days with things like Zoom. So we do trainings online and we'll work with individuals. We'll work with groups. You know, we can customize our programs to, a business if you have one, or, a team that you want us to work with. We can do any of that stuff. So, we're always constantly creating things and customizing things. And, again, we just love working with people that are really, hungry and anxious to make some changes.
Beautiful.
Well said.
Excellent. So I did ask you what you learned about yourself in the process of writing this book, but now I would love to give you the opportunity to share a little bit about what you've learned about each other. So, Dr. Wayne, what have you learned about Dr. Barb in the process of writing this book?
Oh gosh, I don't know how to say this without embarrassing her, but you probably said that just so I would say that. So there you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the proof's in the pudding, David, and all these are just fancy words until it comes down to crunch time. And crunch time is when you're not doing well, when you're crying, and when you're just pissed off, or you're just left wondering what to do next, and the unknown is too big. And oftentimes, Dr. Barb will come to me with something like that. And it's just so easy to be able to be with her and challenge her at the same time, because we have the nomenclature. We've got the words. We've got the method. We often say, if you have the motivation to change, we have the method. And she'll share whatever her grief is. And I give her a lot of TLC. And then all of a sudden she says, you know, I could go blah, 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 blah. And I said, yes, you could. And that's the end of it. And the real turnabout was when I was going through a real hard time. It was really sad in the tail end of a long-term marriage. And she did the same thing to me. And I said, I think I've been here before. And she just laughed. And she said, what do you need? And tell me about grit. And I told her to shut up, and everything was wonderful.
Dr. Barb, I'm going to put it on your plate as well. What have you learned about Dr. Wayne in the process?
He's so funny. I never know what he's going to say. He's always full of surprises. I think Dr. Wayne is one of my most steadfast friends. I think, you know, I can count on him and trust him. And the thing that I just adore about you, Dr. Wayne, is he always holds my heart. Like, he's very caring and gentle with everybody around him. And, it's hard to find people nowadays sometimes that are, very trustworthy and that will do that. Protecting your heart is very important. And, through this whole process, we've had to be very vulnerable about our life stories and, what we've been going through. And I can always count on him. And that just is worth its weight in gold. So, yeah.
The two of you are so inspirational, and together you're a powerhouse. So I'm excited to see what this book is going to do and the lives it's going to change and the conversations it's going to start and the answers it's going to provide. It's going to do all those things. And I'm just so thankful that the two of you were disciplined and obedient to write this, because, you could be pursuing something completely for yourself. But I'm getting the sense, talking to the two of you today, that there's something bigger here that you're trying to do. And I think this book is that step.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope you claim your light too, David.
Yes.
Thank you. And this is a big step in that process. So I on behalf of everyone from Living the Next Chapter that are listening, I just want to thank the two of you again for making time for us, and again for creating something that's going to, again, open some real great communication. So thank you both.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
our
you.
pleasure. Thank you.
Excellent. So everyone, all the information will be in the show notes. Please go and support both Dr. Wayne and Dr. Barb, and let them know that you heard them here on the podcast, and go buy the book. That's really what we're asking you to do, and support the two of them, and leave a review of the book. And thank you for doing that.
Yes.
Thank you both for being here.
Thank
you, David. This has been fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for subscribing and following. And you're listening this far in the podcast, so you are my best friend. I'm sorry, but you are now my best friend. So welcome. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. LivingTheNextChapter.com has a link on the website to our Facebook group. Are you on Facebook? Probably. You can go there and you can actually interact with our guests. You can talk to them. You can hear more about their journey, about their books. You can speak to them directly. You don't need me. You can come right over to LivingTheNextChapter.com, click on our Facebook link to our community. You can talk to other listeners of the podcast from around the world who are on Facebook. And, again, speak with our guests. Don't you want to speak to the guests you just heard from? Yeah, you can do that on Living the Next Chapter. Go over there. There's links to our Facebook group, and you're welcome to join. Thanks for listening.